Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We've got some new news regarding Solasta 2. You all already know, very excited for this game. Solasta 1 is, in my opinion, the purest translation of D&D mechanics into a video game format. One of the best character creation systems I've ever seen. So I'm super excited for what they'll do with the sequel. Now, Tactical Adventures, the developer for Solasta 2, announced that they will participate in the Steam Next Fest, and there'll be a demo available for Solasta 2. So this will start on February 24th, and it's going to run through March 3rd. I have no information regarding what other games are going to be available during this period. So if you all know of any really good CRPGs that are going to have a demo during Steam Next Fest, definitely let me know. I plan to play quite a few games to get a feel for what I should be looking forward to in the upcoming year. But you all already know Solasta 2 is going to be very high on the list. Now, in addition to that, for the past couple of weeks, they've been releasing information regarding subclasses that they plan to include in the game. Now, in addition to that, for the past couple of weeks, they've been releasing information going over the subclasses from Crown of the Magister and also dropping tidbits about what subclasses might be included for Solasta 2. So I figured, hey, we're going to do this video. We might as well review some of that information. In case you are not already aware, the plan for Tactical Adventures is that at launch, Solasta 2 will have 2 subclasses for every class, and they do plan to have all 12 of the original standard D&D classes in the game. So Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. All right, so they plan to have 2 subclasses for each one. One of the subclasses will come from Solasta 1, and then one of the subclasses will be a new one that Tactical Adventures has developed themselves. Now, this is a little bit less than what we had in Crown of the Magister. Crown of the Magister, when it first released, had 3 subclasses at least for each class, but the first game had no multi-classing, which Solasta 2 will have available. So even though you'll have the option of one less subclass, you will be able to mix and match different classes, which should be very interesting. Now keep in mind the mechanics for these classes is based on the SRD, Systems Reference Document, that basically allows developers such as Tactical Adventures to take D&D mechanics and use it in their own game. I believe Solasta was based on a 2016 version of the document, but they're going to be using a 2024 version of the SRD for Solasta. So even if they take subclasses that were used in the original game, the mechanics might change significantly, and we're going to go over some of that in this video. Now, up to this point, we only have information regarding Paladin and Rogue subclasses. And again, they've just kind of reviewed the old subclasses and let us know which ones they would consider using for the next game and which ones absolutely will not be available, along with how these subclasses have changed. They have not released information about what are the new subclasses they plan to include. But looking at what they do have available, let's go ahead and start with Paladin. So of course, Paladin is all about combining martial proficiency with some spell casting. So you have wisdom, charisma, you can use any armor, use shields, and you have the ability to also smite enemies for massive radiant damage. And this was extremely useful in the original game because you faced a lot of vampires and ghouls, and radiant damage was going to do extra damage against them. And there were very few enemies. In fact, I don't think there were any who can actually resist your radiant damage. So just all the way around, having a Paladin on your squad was very useful. While I go over the Paladin mechanics, I might periodically show you some of the concept art that Tactical Adventures has been working on as well, just as a FYI. So the first subclass for the original game is Oath of Devotion, and this was all supposed to be about a vanilla paladin, right? All about honor and good and justice and things of that nature. Now, they got a sacred weapon on their channel Divinity that gave you additional damage based on your charisma modifier, and this was really, really nice. It also made your weapon have a bright light, so you didn't even need a torch. Being able to produce light was extremely helpful in the original game. There was also no concentration needed in order to keep this going. So altogether, it was really, really helpful. This has been updated in the new version of the SRD. So it no longer requires an action for you to use Sacred Weapon, and it lasts for 10 minutes instead of 1 minute. It can also be used to inflict radiant damage, as opposed to before, it would only inflict whatever damage your weapon was capable of dealing. As a trade-off, this subclass is no longer able to use Turn the Unholy, which would enable you to basically send fiends and undead fleeing away from you, which was extremely useful and a great way to kind of whittle down how many enemies you actually had to deal with. Once again, the base game for Solasta 1 loved throwing both undead and most especially vampires at you, so there were a ton of opportunities to make use of this, and it was especially useful if you did not have a cleric. TA also strongly hinted that they would take away the shield spell from this subclass. So in the original game, shield was a reaction spell that would allow you to increase your AC by 5 if you were about to get hit. Extremely powerful, extremely useful, especially considering paladins will already have high AC, so it made you even more of a tank. They will probably instead replace this with Shield of Faith, which would allow you to increase your AC by 2 for a limited period of time, and it would require concentration. So still allow you to be a little bit more tanky, but absolutely a downgrade compared to what Shield was able to provide. They also briefly mentioned that Aura of Devotion would potentially be made a little bit more powerful. So in the original game, it was going to prevent all of your party members from being charmed as long as you're conscious, which wasn't very useful in the base game because there weren't that many enemies who were even capable of attempting to charm your group. So it seems like there might be more of that type of creature in Solasta 2, which might potentially cause them to go ahead and bring this subclass in. The rest of these classes are all ones that TA homebrewed themselves based on the SRD mechanics. And the first one is Oath of the Motherland. So this is supposed to be a paladin who's devoted to restoring lands from a pre-cataclysm state. Now, dealing with lands in that volcanic state requires the paladin to really be able to deal with fire. And so basically this is a fire paladin. Unfortunately, it could be bad in the game depending on just one damage type, but because this is a paladin, you can switch things up a little bit more. You have the option of radiant damage, divine smite, or standard melee attacks. And so leaning so heavily into fire isn't that big of a deal. You have the volcanic aura at level 7, which is going to give your entire team fire resistance and add +1 to AC. There are a lot of enemies in the game that love to use fire, so this was very, very beneficial. Unfortunately, the trade-off is your channel divinity options are weaker overall, and so you have to make a decision about whether or not this is worth it to you. Not clear at all whether or not this is something that they would be interested in bringing into Solasta 2. Third on the list is Oath of Tirmar, and TA made it clear this is definitely not a subclass they plan to bring into Solasta 2, specifically because this paladin is all about hunting down Soroks, which was a big deal in Solasta 1 and very, very beneficial because by far the enemy you dealt with the most was Soroks, but that's not going to be the case in the sequel, and so the mechanics for this Paladin really don't make sense. Also, it seems like they're at least potentially looking at bringing in the Oath of the Watcher type of Paladin, which focuses on dealing additional damage to enemies that are capable of shape-shifting, which is very similar to Oath of Tirmar, and so that would be even more reason why most likely they're not going to do anything with this. And then last on the list is Oath of Judgement. Once again, this is a subclass that TA created themselves. Keep in mind, this came with the Lost Valley DLC, which I believe was the second DLC pack that they came out with. So there's a lot of people who played Solasta, but probably never got an opportunity to play around with the subclass. This one is all about playing as a Paladin who focuses on Judgement. So you're very aggressive and very offensive. They said that it's basically supposed to be Judge Dredd as a Paladin, and so early you'll be able to channel divinity in a way that allows you to restrain enemies. You're going to be able to purge weakness and statuses from your allies. At level 7, you're going to get an aura of righteousness, which is going to add damage to all of your allies' attacks equal to your proficiency bonus. You could really, really abuse this in the first game. Like, you could pull out a magic missile where for every missile it was going to get this additional damage bonus, which was absolutely insane and could wipe out enemies. So it was definitely nice to have an Oath of Judgement Paladin on your team, but this has been addressed in the new version of SRD, and so now in order to get this extra damage, you have to actually roll an attack, which levels it out just a little bit more. Once again, it's not clear which of these subclasses TA is leaning towards. They are fine with Oath of Devotion, Motherland, and Judgment, while Tirmar is clearly not an option they want to move forward with. So once they provide some specific information about which subclasses they're going to use, I'll definitely announce them on the channel. Now, the other class that they have provided some information on is Rogue. So of course, Rogue is all about sneak attacking. You're going to be using some dexterity, light armor, finesse weapons to trigger that sneak attack. You're going to have a bunch of different skills. Usually you're going to be better at stealth and lock picking than some other classes. There's definitely a lot of great reasons to pick a thief. Also, you were going to have cunning action, which allows you to use a bonus action during your turn where you can dash, disengage, or hide. Definitely allows you to use some run in, damage an enemy, and then run back out type of play style. Really, really cool all the way around. I use rogues multiple times during my playthroughs. I don't like them from a damage standpoint as much as some of the other classes because sneak attack just isn't quite as effective as being able to attack multiple times, which some of the other classes are able to take advantage of more. But at the end of the day, it's still really, really cool having a rogue in the party. Now, your first subclass is Thief, right? And this is a typical rogue archetype, right? So they're all about agility and being able to steal things, larceny, things of that nature, right? And the big deal is that with fast hands, your cunning action, so that extra bonus action that you have, allows you to use an object. This, for the most part, wasn't all that great in Solasta 1 because in the tabletop version, you know, there's a wide variety of different items you could potentially use to help your team. But in the video game, there's only so many options, and most of them weren't really all that effective in combat. There were some wands you could use for spells or things of that nature, but for the most part, it wasn't all that great. It got significantly better at level 13 because then you could use items and ignore all class, ancestry, and level requirements for the use of it, which significantly opened up your options. But again, you had to wait until level 13 before you could get it. The other advantage of this class was it allowed you to climb much easier, which was really cool in Solasta because verticality was king. And so being able to quickly give up to levels where enemies were, or that were better positions from which to strike your enemies, was absolutely useful. But at the end of the day, there were a bunch of other ways to be able to do the same thing. So overall, Thief wasn't all that great. Of course, it perfectly fit the archetype, but it just wasn't all that great all the way around. But it seems like TA is considering bringing this into the game. Hopefully there's a much better distribution of items in Solasta 2, and so fast hands would be much more useful than it was in the original. Darkweaver is a subclass they definitely do not plan to bring back. It revolves around poisons and spiders, which theoretically is really cool. TA says that they made this very early in the dev process, and when the team was much smaller and they just didn't have the resources to go back and make it more focused. So it provides a bonus proficiency which gives you the poisonous kit, but you can easily get that from a background, so it's really not all that great for a class. It has the same climbing bonus that you can get from Thief. So once again, you could also get that from an item as well. So just all the way around, not all that impressive. Now, it is kind of cool that if you're hitting an enemy on lower ground with a ranged weapon, you add your proficiency bonus to damage. But then at level 9, you get the ability to poison your melee weapons. And so it's like, well, which one is this class focused on? Are they focused on being ranged, or are they focused on melee? And then the DC is flat, which obviously is disadvantageous. There's no way to increase it and make the poison more effective versus enemies. So unfortunately, on multiple levels, this class just wasn't quite straightened out. TA feels like they easily could straighten it out, but still, they don't feel like it's worth putting it into Solasta 2 because it has too big of a reliance on poison and vertical environments. Now, next up is Shadowcaster, and this is supposed to be the spell casting rogue type, basically an arcane trickster, except they wanted to focus less on subterfuge and more on being an all-out magical assassin. This is another subclass that was made early in development when TA was much smaller, but they feel like it works a lot better than Darkweaver did because spell casting works much better overall in the game, and so it helps this class. So it was really important to TA that Shadowcaster came off as different from an arcane trickster, and so they were very careful with the specific magic schools you had access to: divination, illusion, necromancy, and abjuration. But unfortunately, in practice, these schools really just don't help you feel like an all-out magical assassin, and you couldn't use spells while dual wielding, and so overall it just really didn't work well. Plus, you don't have the ability to sneak attack when you damage enemies with spells until level 13. So it just seemed all the way around the spell casting didn't synergize properly with your rogue mechanics. This has all been updated in the SRD, and so now this class will get Conjuration, Evocation, Necromancy, and Transmutation as its spell schools, which is significantly more useful. And the sneak attack from Shadowcasting is actually going to be available at level 3 instead of level 13. So just all the way around, the mechanics of this subclass are much better suited to a sneak attacking rogue who has powerful spell casting ability, and TA has stated that they are likely to add this subclass into Solasta 2. Now, last on the list is Hoodlum, and this is another subclass that was added with the Lost Valley DLC. So many of you who played Solasta never saw this class or had an opportunity to play with it. And it's all about basically trying to give the player an opportunity to play as a henchman or a street corner hoodlum type of person. And it's a rogue who actually is able to use strength weapons. So starting at level 3, you're going to get access to heavy beating, which allows you to use sneak attack when using non-finesse melee weapons. Obviously, that could be very, very beneficial. And in addition to that, you gain proficiency with martial weapons, medium armor, and shields, which all the way around, all other rogues do not have access to. The problem with this subclass, unfortunately, is first and foremost, you needed to have made the decision you were going to use it right from the beginning, because obviously it depends on strength so much. So right off the bat, that could be an issue for the player, and you're kind of dead in the water for levels 1 and 2, right? Because you're not going to be able to sneak attack at all if you're using those regular strength-based martial weapons beforehand. And so that was also an issue. TA believes that they're probably not going to bring this subclass into Solasta 2 because, of course, the vast majority of rogues are going to be dexterity-based. They're going to want to multi-class with other classes that can take advantage of dexterity. And so it'll be odd for one of the only 2 subclasses you have available to demand a strength-based build. So maybe something that'll be brought in down the line, but right up front, they're gonna focus on a much more standard type of rogue playthrough. And that is all the information I have regarding the demo and the subclass information they provided thus far. Again, there are going to be 2 new subclasses, one for Paladin, one for Rogue, and frankly, one for each class, but we have no information as of yet about what those subclasses are going to be. Keep locked in. Make sure you subscribe here if you want more Solasta information. And please, if you enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like down below. I'll keep bringing this content in as Tactical Adventures provides more information. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.